Hey everyone, it's Xinfonia. I've already done a video on what Aglaea does and how strong she will be. So now I'm going to be teaching you how to actually maximize her damage and build her properly. Very quickly, for Trace priority, quite a lot of the skills are important, even the memo sprites, unlike RMC, so you should be leveling most of them, and the lowest priority would be her skill. When it comes to building Aglaea, there are a few principles or guidelines you need to understand. Firstly, Aglaea wants high ultimate uptime. This directly affects our choices of teammates and her rope. Secondly, Aglaea has a ton of crit damage sources. This means we want to get as many crit rate stats as possible since she will already be getting a lot of crit damage. Finally, speed is extremely important on Aglaea, probably more so than any other character in the game. This is because she directly converts speed to attack, and the conversion is fantastic. With that out of the way, let's start with relic stats. You want a crit body, speed boots, damage orb, and attack or ERR rope. Pretty much everything is fixed except the choice of rope. Most of the time, ERR should be your go-to. This is because we already get a stupid amount of attack and we want to get Aglaea's ultimate up as fast as possible. In my experience, the only few times you can ditch ERR is if you have at least 2 teammates with energy regen, like Ho Ting Yun Sunday, and you are also dealing with enemies who can regenerate your energy, like the new war armor enemies, or you have E1 Aglaea. In pretty much every other scenario, ERR will help you regenerate your energy quicker, and hence leading to a higher ultimate uptime, which is where a huge majority of Aglaea's damage comes from. For relic sets, we have Hero of Triumphant Song. This is her best in slot 4 piece and is pretty much your only choice. It looks quite average on the surface, but the 30% crit damage also applies to the memo sprite, which means it's actually a 60% crit damage boost in total for Aglaea and the Garment Maker. Now for planar ornaments, we have Rutidon Arena and Wondrous Banana Amusement Park. They are pretty close in performance, about 3% difference. They outperform each other in different scenarios as well. Basically, if you have lower crit rate, you want to get Rutidon Arena, and if you have higher crit rate, you want to get Banana Amusement Park, since extra crit rate doesn't do anything for you. So if you want to really maximize your builds, you want to get about 90 plus crit rate in battle. So if you have Sunday, you have to subtract 20% crit rate, and then from there you can build accordingly. Like if you already have 90%, even without your planar ornaments, you can just use Wondrous Banana Amusement Park. But if the 8% crit rate is important and helps you get to 90+%, then you would be using that instead. And for her speed breakpoint, it's quite simple as well. Basically, at maximum stacks in the Supreme stance, you want Aglaea to have twice of Sunday's speed. This allows Aglaea to act 2 times before Sunday can act, and you are truly maximizing Aglaea's high speed. Usually, you want Sunday to at least have 134 speed, so this would mean Aglaea must have about 268 at 6 stacks, and at 0 stacks or outside of the battle, this would be about 160 to 170 speed. However, this is genuinely quite hard to do without her S1. It is possible, but you need a lot of speed substats. Hence, you have 2 choices here. You can just suck it up and run Aglaea like a normal damage carry, or you can try and reduce Sunday's speed so the requirement for Aglaea's maximum speed is also lower. Now for light cones, just like Remembrance Trailblazer, Aglaea doesn't have a lot of options for the same reason. We have her signature light cone, Time Woven into Gold. This increases your base speed and also gives you stacks of Brocade that increases both Aglaea and Garment Maker's crit damage. And when you reach the maximum stacks, which is very easy to do, you even get a basic attack damage boost equivalent to the crit damage boost. Unfortunately, the basic attack damage boost seems to only apply to Aglaea even in the joint attack, but the crit damage still applies to both, which means 108% crit damage in total. The most important part is actually the increase in base speed. This is because increases in percentage speed is calculated using your base speed, not your total speed. And Aglaea gets a ton of percentage speed, about 90%, which is why this small increase in base speed will actually increase your total max speed by quite a lot. The difference can be about 30. Other than her signature light cone, we have the new Battle Pass light cone, Sweat Now, Cry Less. This is a very strong light cone, but again, you require higher speed. The uptime for the buffs are very high and also applies to the Memo Sprite, which is why it has relatively high performance. Other than that, we have Genius's Greetings and Reminiscence. Genius's Greetings has lower uptime, which is why even though it's a 4-star light cone, It's basically equivalent to the 3-star light cone, and you guessed it, it's because the 3-star light cone has a very high uptime on the buffs. Honestly, I kinda skip this section for most characters because they are really easy to play, but Aglaea, I think some people might struggle a bit because in her best team with Robin, Sunday, or sometimes even RMC, you can get 400% action advance, which is quite ridiculous. Having Aglaea act less than twice is really not ideal. However, sometimes you can also intentionally miss the 100 action value so that your Aglaea gets higher uptime on the buffs. Because if Aglaea gets like 400% action advance in a row, even Sunday's buff will run out. Which is why the general idea to playing Aglaea is finding a balance between action advance and keeping your buffs up. And this depends on what stage of the battle you are at. At the start of the battle, it's all about building your speed stacks and gaining energy as fast as you can. This is where you can afford to lose some uptime on the buffs because Aglaea hasn't even used her ultimate. You just want to take as many turns as possible to get more energy. Once you reach max stacks and you are in the supreme stance, this is where you start to play a bit more carefully. You want to check your buffs and see which are running out, and making sure Aglaea keeps most of her buffs. When it comes to vertical investment, Aglaea has somewhat decent Eidolons, but not really as crazy as units like Acheron, Firefly, and so on. Her E1 doesn't actually increase her damage by much, but it is a huge QOL investment as it regenerates extra energy for Aglaea when either her or the Garment Maker hits the enemy with Seam Stitch. This allows you to run less teammates with energy regen and also run an attack rope over an ERR rope, which means it should give you a bigger increase than what is shown here. The reason why this is good is because it allows Aglaea to use her ultimate before it even ends, and when this happens, you can keep all your stacks. You don't have to restack her ultimate, which means you get the maximum attack boost consistently or constantly. Unfortunately, there are still scenarios where it's not the best because even if Aglaea regenerates her ultimate faster, your teammates like maybe Robin may not have her ultimate backup. However, it so easily solves her energy issues that this should still be the priority between E1 and S1. E1 makes Aglaea extremely easy to play, and S1 is like the cherry on top, makes your builds easier. Both are really good. E2 enables both Aglaea and the Garment Maker to ignore 14% defense when they take action, stacking up to 3 times. I really dislike this Eidolon because it has to be consecutively, and you can't even use your teammates' actions or abilities in between. You still will have 100% uptime or pretty much 100% uptime for 14% defense reduction, but it's really hard to get the consistent 42% defense reduction, which is why it translates to less than a 20% damage increase. E4 increases the stacks of speed from 6 to 7 and allows Aglaea to increase the speed of Garment Maker as well. This is extremely useful for, stacking faster, but it only really shows a bigger difference in longer fights if you do not reuse her ultimate before it ends. But since it's E4, you already have E1, you are able to reuse ultimate, so most of the value is actually from the start of the battle and a little bit from the increased attack boost. Finally, we have E6. It increases both Aglaea's and the Garment Maker's lightning respan by 20% and allows the joint damage to deal more damage based on their speed. Honestly, this kind of phrasing is extremely frustrating because for some reason StarRail never specifies if it's an independent multiplier or not, and I actually could not find any information on this. The same goes for Facial E1 and Fugue E4. Like, you could at least tell me, But from watching some of the gameplay, I believe this is an independent multiplier because it almost doubles the damage, going from 530,000 each joint attack to easily over 1 million. Which is why you see such a huge increase in damage here, going from 20,000+ DPAV to 40,000+. Finally, team building. Aglaea's team building is also quite straightforward since her kit is restricted by energy regen, which is why we will be taking a closer look at these units to give you a better understanding of which units to run. The general idea is that you want at least one energy regen unit, like Huohuo, Sunday, or Tingyun. In fact, you can even use multiple of them if you want. Afterwards, units like Robin, RMC, Get a Girl with Quid Pro Quo, even units like Facial or E1 Jade can technically work as well. I'm not too sure yet, but 3B seems to be decent for Aglaea as well. Firstly, we have Huohuo. She honestly doesn't do a whole lot for Aglaea other than energy regen. Her attack boost is quite big, but Aglaea already gets a lot of attack from her bonus ability, and her buff will only last for 2 turns. With Aglaea's high speed, this will unfortunately run out quite quickly on top of the diminishing returns, but we don't really have better options, so Huohuo is her best sustain. Tingyun is kind of like Huohuo. Her main selling point in an Aglaea team is the energy regen because Aglaea is too fast, which is why her buffs will run out very quickly and requires Tingyun to replenish her skill more often since it is based on the target's turns, not her own turn. Otherwise, Tingyun would have been a much more powerful support for Aglaea. Sunday is one of the best teammates for Aglaea, but gets even stronger when paired with Robin. Being able to advance the Memo Sprite allows Garment Maker to stack speed much faster at the start of the battle. Other than crit damage, Sunday also gives a crit rate and damage boost. What makes these buffs stronger than most other units is that it lasts for a longer duration. This allows Aglaea to take multiple turns before Sunday, and you don't have to worry too much about your buff uptime, or rather worry less. Of course, the best part is his energy regen, which allows Aglaea to get her ultimate faster. Robin is also one of the best teammates for Aglaea when paired with Sunday. This is because her buffs are based on her own turns and not the target. This means the buffs received from Robin will have a much higher uptime and is much easier to play around. Not to mention, there is an insane synergy with Robin and Aglaea, as Aglaea is able to activate Robin's talent and ultimate twice with a single joint attack, because it is considered as 2 attacks. What this does is that it directly increases Robin's damage, because it regenerates her ultimate faster, giving it higher uptime, and also giving her more instances of additional damage, because it can proc twice. Remembrance Trailblazer is a decent free-to-play option since Aglaea's teams can regenerate a ton of energy. However, like I already highlighted in previous videos, this is dependent on Aglaea's turns, which means a faster unit like Aglaea would make worse use of the true damage buff. Furthermore, the joint attack ideally wants both Aglaea and the Garment Maker to be buffed at the same time, but RMC can pretty much only do one at a time. RMC could have been a much better support if it also applied this buff to the Memo Sprite, which would make a lot more sense, right, since they are the first Remembrance support. But that is not to be since Hoyoverse seems to be trying to cut down on free-to-play characters' strength. Using Get a Girl with Crit Proco is kind of the same reasoning as using him in other Robin teams, except this team it's probably fine if some of the energy also goes to Aglaea. Basically a budget sustain option for regenerating energy if you don't have Ho-Ho. Facial may actually be a decent choice because it doubles her stacks with each joint attack. It's kind of like Facial and Hunt March, except Aglaea does way more damage and gives way more stacks. The team building is slightly awkward, but I believe this should still work pretty decently. E1 Jade or even E0 Jade sometimes is quite straightforward as well. Aglaea's extremely high frequency allows Jade to gain stacks very quickly. However, Aglaea is already pretty good at dealing with many enemies, and this team is probably better for like general farming, like in the open world, or if you're running Aglaea in pure fiction. For 3B, she is a leaked content, so I won't be talking about her, but I really think she could be a decent synergy, but I think this will require more testing, and also she's probably better in other teams. That's pretty much it for my Aglaea guide. If you enjoyed it or it helped you, don't forget to like or even subscribe to the channel. See you.